you're looking to dive into topics on how to live a happier, healthier, more fit, and long lifespan, then you've come to the right podcast. Living the Dream with me, Coach Damian Evans. Together, we will explore the topics on all things health, fitness, and wellness. Together, we will be lifelong learners on this journey to living the ultimate dream. What up, Dream Team? Coach D here, coming at you from beautiful sunny San Diego, and welcome back to the Living the Dream podcast. And in today's episode, we are going to continue on with our review of the book Good Energy by Dr. Calley Means and her brother Calley Means. We've been getting such good feedback from these chapter reviews. I'm just going to keep on rolling through this book. We're just going to keep on finding out amazing content to help us live a healthy life. This next chapter was titled, Your Body Has the Answers: How to Read Your Blood Tests and Get Actionable Insights from Your Wearables. And it might get a little bit educational here. It might go a little bit into the numbers here. So this might be one where you have to take out a piece of paper and write down some of those ranges for healthy, optimal ranges when it comes to things like your blood glucose, your triglycerides, your HDL, LDL, that kind of stuff. But today we're going to be diving into a fascinating topic that will help you take control of your health in ways that you might not even thought were possible. We're going to explore how you can harness the power of modern technology and then also blood tests to truly understand your body and make informed decisions about your health. Let me share a little story from the book about Emily, a pregnant woman who experienced firsthand the limitations of traditional medical testing. At 24 weeks of pregnancy, Emily went through the standard oral glucose tolerance test to check for if she had anything like gestational diabetes. Her doctor's lab results came back, and they came back normal, assuring her that she was in the clear. However, Emily had a personal interest in data, and at the time was wearing a continuous glucose monitor. This device gave her a much more detailed picture of her blood sugar levels before and after the test. Surprisingly, the CGM, the glucose monitor, the data showed that her blood glucose levels were actually in the gestational diabetes range, contradicting the very single data point from the lab test, meaning she got her lab test and it was a single point in time, whereas the continuous glucose monitor showed the range of her glucose levels throughout the entire day. So what happens if you get that test done at a low point in your blood sugar or at a very high point, at the peaks or the valleys of your daily glucose levels? That's a problem. It's the bigger picture that we really need to be looking at. Emily's story is a great example of how real-time data from a CGM can provide insights that standard medical tests might miss. With a CGM, Emily could track her blood sugar levels throughout the day, giving her a detailed picture of how her body responded to different foods as well as different activities throughout her day. This kind of data can be a game changer, especially when it comes to managing conditions like gestational diabetes. And this brings us to an important point. Most of us don't get enough insight into our bodies. We are so disconnected from our bodies. We have no data gathered. We kind of go throughout our day thinking about how we feel from time to time, but only really when we don't feel well. Today, we have more access to information about cars, finances, computers, all that stuff than we do about our own health. We go through annual checkups and lab tests, but the insights that we get are often very limited, and they don't tell the full story. Emily's CGM provided her with dozens of glucose data points throughout the day, and that added up to weeks and months, which gave her a more dynamic picture of her blood sugar levels. This level of detail can help identify issues that a single lab test might and probably will miss. For Emily, the CGM data showed that her blood sugar levels were in the gestational diabetes range, even though her lab tests came back and indicated otherwise. And this highlights a significant issue in our healthcare system: the lack of comprehensive, real-time data to understand our bodies better. Most expecting mothers and patients in general, when it comes to going to the hospital, don't get nearly as much insight into their bodies as Emily did with just one wearable device, her CGM. Let's talk about why this is important. Understanding how food impacts our health, it then empowers us to make better decisions throughout the day. Unfortunately, the healthcare system often prevents us from getting the information that we need. So we get our lab results and maybe we get the results back, but we aren't really explained in depth on what they mean. Or sometimes the hospital won't even give you the data that you need. Like you'll get the test and they'll only give you certain things back. For example, in 22 US states, patients don't even legally own their own medical records. Doctors and hospitals own their medical records. This lack of access to our own health data prevents us from understanding our health trajectories and making proactive choices. That's messed up. Think about your last visit to the doctor. How often have you been told that, well, everything looks fine, even when you don't feel fine? Or perhaps you were prescribed medication without a thorough discussion about the underlying causes or lifestyle changes that you could make in order to not have to do this medication or to not be on it as long. This happens because many doctors are trained to follow the protocols rather than interpret lab results holistically. But here's the good news. We're entering a new era of medicine. All of those downsides that the medical system has seen for however long it's been there, and for as bad as it has been, private companies are diving into this system and trying to make changes, and the pendulum will swing. Technologies like wearables, continuous monitors, and direct-to-consumer lab testing are revolutionizing how we understand our health. This concept is known as bio-observability. Bio-observability. It allows us to observe our own biology in real time. Imagine having the ability to see how your diet, see how your exercise and movement, and how your daily habits impact your health instantly. Instant feedback, letting you know if you're on the right track, if you're going off track. How much is this one thing affecting your health negatively or positively? Instantly. This shift is so empowering. It's empowering patients like we've never seen before. You no longer have to blindly trust your doctor or anyone else for that matter. You can trust your own body and the data that it provides. Your body communicates with you through symptoms, through blood tests, through biosensors, and by learning to read these signals and then connect them to how you're feeling and putting all these little data points together, you can make informed decisions that promote your long-term health and well-being. Emily's experience with the CGM changed her perspective on food and health. She realized that food wasn't an enemy, but it was a tool that she could use. You can use a hammer to build a house. You can also use a hammer to demolish a house. It's how you use the tool. This mindset shift is a powerful, powerful thing. Instead of focusing on weight loss or appearance, Emily, she started to think about how food impacts her long-term health and well-being and her blood glucose levels. She began to connect her diet and her energy levels, her stress, and her overall health. We live in a really exciting time where we have the potentials to live the longest, healthiest lives in human history. But this requires taking charge of our health, being the CEO of our own health. It's time to trust yourself and understand your own body and join the movement of people who are demanding access to their health data. Symptoms of your body, symptoms that are happening inside of you, those are a gift. Think about it. How do you feel right now? How do you feel? Many patients that Dr. Calley Means saw in her practice, they tell her, they feel fine, or they feel like they're pretty healthy. But then when they dig into a detailed symptom questionnaire, they often find that they have 10 or even more discrete symptoms or conditions that their previous doctors just chalked up as, normal. These symptoms often include things like neck pain, seasonal sinus infections, or recurrent colds, eczema, itchy ear canals, lower back pain, acne, headaches, bloating, acid reflux, a chronic cough, maybe a little bit of anxiety here or there, trouble falling asleep, low energy, or things like PMS symptoms like cramps and moodiness. None of these are normal. You can and you should feel incredible mentally and physically most of the time. We have so normalized what Dr. Mark Hyman calls FLC, feel like crap syndrome, that many of us can't even imagine what it could feel like to not have FLC and be symptom free. Every one of the handful of symptoms that I just listed is a sign from the body that the cells are not getting what they need and could be improved in some way by minimizing things like we talked about in the previous episodes: oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, chronic inflammation. These things can be minimized or improved with food and lifestyle changes. Taking stock of baseline symptoms is a very simple but very critical step in enhanced bioobservability. And I urge you to take the symptom questionnaire on Dr. Calley Means' website. It's calleymeans.com/goodenergy, and look for the symptom questionnaire. This was adapted from the Institute of Functional Medicine, and just see what has been affecting you over the past 30 days. We're told that the symptoms, these are things that we need to fear, and then we need to immediately treat with a pill. I got a headache. Ooh, boom, got to take that pill. I'm feeling a little nauseous or a little acid reflux. Boom, got to take that pill. But these symptoms, they're actually a gift. If we can stop trying to cover them up and trying to shut them up, and if we start thinking of your cells as 37 trillion infants that are in your care, you are made up of 37 trillion cells, and these are all infants in your care. And like infants, the cells can't communicate with words. So symptoms are their way of crying and wailing out to get your attention, to have their needs met. And every time a symptom crops up, you should be asking yourself, what is my body trying to tell me? If my neck pain starts acting up, maybe I start to look at how my sleep and my stress levels have been. If I have anxiety, maybe I think about whether I've been exercising, or how much alcohol have I had this week, or how have my relationships been? If a pimple pops up out of the blue, I think about whether sneaky sugar has crept into a recent meal that I ate or prepared. If I have a headache, I think back on my hydration over the last couple of days. If I have PMS symptoms, I think about all the factors that may have affected my hormones differently that month, like my fiber intake or my alcohol intake, or again, my stress or my sleep. Another important way that our body speaks to us is through our biomarkers. And this is where it's going to get a little bit sciencey and a little bit numbery, but I think it's really important. So I'll do my best to kind of dumb it down. How to analyze a standard blood test. You have triglycerides, you have fasting glucose, and then you have the quote unquote good cholesterol and the quote unquote bad cholesterol. We have all nodded as the doctors quickly glossed over our test results when they tell us about these numbers. Yeah, okay, it looks like these are in this range. And okay, nodding our head. Yes, I think I understand what you mean. But very few of us have any idea of what these numbers actually mean. These numbers have limitations. They are a single snapshot. When our body is so highly dynamic, just like the example with Emily, it's a single snapshot when you get your blood taken. It doesn't show you what's happening throughout that 24-hour day period. But even though it is just a snapshot, it still can kind of give us some powerful clues to metabolic health and cellular energy management when interpreted together properly. So we shouldn't be looking at these numbers that we're getting as like, this is exactly what's happening, because we also know that there's the placebo effect and the nocebo effect. If we get our blood markers taken at a poor time in our day and all of our numbers come back terrible, okay, well then we know we're in this position where, oh no, we're really unhealthy. And then we start to stress and all this stuff. So it could go the wrong way. Or maybe you could respond healthily and you could change your entire lifestyle and take it for the better. It's just how you respond to these things. You just have to look at this as data and continue collecting data. The question that you're really trying to answer with standard blood tests is whether you are part of the 6.8% of people in the United States. Only 6.8 meet the normal criteria for those 5 basic metabolic biomarkers without medication, and therefore are a step in the right direction to having good energy. So only 6.8 of us are metabolically healthy. About 93% of us are metabolically unhealthy. And to answer the question, whether you're part of the 6.8% or the 93%, which part are you will need to obtain your lab results and your vital signs from your most recent annual physical. And you need to get a measuring tape. Among your life's top priorities, you should be making it into that 6.8% of people who are metabolically healthy. And if you don't achieve that goal, you'll almost certainly experience more conditions like depression, acne, headaches, or any of the deadly chronic diseases in life that we've talked about. If you're a woman, you'll be more likely to pass metabolic dysfunction onto your child in utero, be it infertile, have a miscarriage, experience worse menopausal symptoms, or even things terrible like developing Alzheimer's. We have normalized an environment where 70% of the nation's population will have an overt chronic disease soon. And that doesn't have to be you. It's not going to be us if we follow everything that we're learning on this podcast. I'm a huge believer in personal choice. I'm a huge believer in individual freedoms. I think that's so important. And for people to eat or do things that are unhealthy, that's their choice. If you choose to do that, I totally support you in that. But we should all at least know where we are on the spectrum of good or bad energy so that we can make informed decisions. Scientific research on behavior change has shown that patients who have access to their own health data have significantly better outcomes. Maybe that's because they're more well off and they're able to do things like private blood testing companies or whatever. But the stats show that you have better health outcomes when you have your own health data, access to it. I believe that if a patient with a high triglyceride to HDL ratio, if they could clearly understand that having this biomarker makes them 89% more likely to have depression, if they have a high triglyceride to HDL ratio, I have to believe that they would be more likely to follow a diet and lifestyle plan that optimizes their metabolism. 9 out of every 10 times you're going to have more depression if you have this number. If someone knew that stat, I have to believe that they would want to follow a better diet and lifestyle plan, and it would be more motivating to be more empowered about our health. We must understand that the 5 basic metabolic biomarkers that generally come at no cost during our annual physical, and what those look like, and how we can use that data to motivate us to make lifestyle changes. So let's talk about a couple of these. Triglycerides. Am I overwhelming my cells with glucose? When we consume more sugar and carbohydrates than our liver mitochondria can handle and process, the excess glucose is converted into triglycerides, and it's then shipped out into the bloodstream to be stored in our tissues and our muscles in a process called de novo lipogenesis. De novo is new, lipo is fat, and genesis is to make new fat. De novo lipogenesis. So the sugar and the carbohydrates we eat, we cannot process them in the liver. The mitochondria are overwhelmed. The excess glucose then gets converted into triglycerides, and those get shipped out to make new fat. If we think about this evolutionarily, this process makes sense. Triglycerides are a form of fat that can be used for energy when humans are fasting, which they were often forced to do in the feast or famine cycles of pre-modern life. So when they needed this energy or they exerted themselves, they could then access this stored energy. But in our modern society, we are just constantly fed and largely sedentary. So these triglycerides, they just keep piling up in the bloodstream. Insulin resistance then causes overburdened fat cells, these storage units throughout the body, to break down fat, which sends more fat back to the liver for triglyceride production. And unfortunately, the liver cells filled with fat, and those don't work properly, and those block insulin signaling. And this just is a cycle. It's exacerbating insulin resistance in a vicious cycle occurring in most US bodies today. Whoa. In terms of what raises triglyceride levels, the simple message is that high triglycerides are almost certainly a warning sign that you are eating too much sugar, too many refined carbohydrates, and or alcohol, and probably not engaging in enough physical activity. So it's a proxy for what we're seeing when it comes to our diet and our movement. You're going to need to reduce the amount of carbs that are overwhelming your liver and turning into fat. This means cutting out, for sure, soda, sugar-sweetened beverages, juices, even those healthy juices that you think you have at the store, any added sugar of any kind, candy, of course, products with refined grains, meaning breads, pastas, crackers, tortillas, chips, cookies, pastries, cakes, cereals. We know what we're not supposed to eat for the high blood sugar spike, and other high glycemic foods like that. And you need to increase your daily movement so that you can start to burn this excess fuel. This is just like if you had a funnel and you're pouring a ton of liquid down this funnel. And if you pour so much liquid that it starts to back up the funnel, you have to stop the input and you have to give it time for the output to get all of that stuff out of the funnel. So you can't expect to feel better right away, right? You're stopping food. Some people will just stop eating their sugar and then 2 days later say that they don't feel any better, or maybe they feel even worse. You have to realize that this is a long game. You can't just expect immediate results, which is why maybe some people go on a diet for a couple of weeks and they just don't feel any better. They're not seeing results, and then they just go right back to their way of eating, and then they just start filling up that funnel again. And then things can compound with stuff like excess alcohol consumption. This has a negative impact on triglyceride levels due to its impact on liver function. With triglyceride levels going up as alcohol consumption also goes up, which will likely be even worse if you drink anything that has any added sugars or mixers or juices in it. Those sugary alcoholic drinks make it even worse. Additionally, when alcohol is consumed with a meal containing fat, specifically saturated fat, it may worsen post-meal triglyceride levels by impairing the activity of lipoprotein lipase, an enzyme that normally clears triglycerides. So aside from increased triglycerides as alcohol consumption goes up, alcohol also depletes antioxidant resources in the cells and generates reactive oxygen species, both of which contribute to poor metabolic health. So all that means is that when you are eating this high carbohydrate diet and you're also consuming alcohol, alcohol is stopping all the processes that help you to try to get all this blood sugar processed. So essentially what you're doing is you're compounding bad with bad. And if your goal is body composition, alcohol has no positive impact. It's only taking you further from your goal. When it comes to your health and your blood biomarkers, it shows that, really it doesn't have any good help. The only thing that the blue zones have talked about when it comes to alcohol having a positive impact is the relationships that it brings and the stress relief that it brings. But honestly, there's other ways to do that. And you should know that when you're drinking alcohol, you're just making that trade-off when it comes to your health. There's things that I do all the time. When I go to the fair and I eat fried food, I know I'm making a trade-off for my health. It's an experience, and I'm hoping that all the other healthy stuff that I do in my life balances that out. But I know that I'd be better off without that fried elephant ear that I ate or that bacon-wrapped corn dog that I ate, whatever it is. So it's a trade-off. So the ranges for triglycerides that's considered normal by standard criteria is less than 150 milligrams per deciliter. But the optimal range is 80, less than 80 milligrams per deciliter. So if you get your triglycerides tested, you're shooting for under 150, but your really, really long-term goal is less than 80. Now in the book, Dr. Casey, she talks about how the range should be much lower. The research shows that the probability of a cardiovascular event for things like a heart attack or stroke is 50% less in people with triglycerides under 81. So she's talking about the optimal range right now. 50% less probability of a cardiovascular event with people that have under 81 milligrams per deciliter of triglycerides. versus people in the normal levels between 110 and 153. Yet doctors tell both groups that they are in the normal range. Levels above 153 sharply drive up that risk. Now, in her case, her triglyceride levels that she measured on 2 different diets. One of the diets was a high carb, low fat, vegan diet. High carb, low fat, vegan diet. And the other one was more omnivorous. It had higher fat, moderately low carb, and both of these, her triglycerides were at 47, which is great. She said under 80 and she was at 47. Why did both of these diets keep her triglycerides low? Neither diet overwhelmed the cells with too much energy to process because both focused on unprocessed whole foods that cued her complex satiety mechanisms to signal her not to overeat. So if you pair dietary strategies with comprehensive good energy habits such as sleep, stress management, toxin avoidance, exercise, things like that, your whole metabolic system will churn through any excess energy substrates from food and maintain mitochondrial health. And you'll best be set up for a healthier triglyceride level. So those 2 drastically different diets got her the results of low triglycerides, mostly because she didn't eat ultra processed food, mostly because she didn't over-consume calories, and mostly because she ate foods that told her when she was full, they were satiating, and they were low in sugar. So there's lots of ways to get to that triglyceride level. Let's move on to high-density lipoprotein, HDL. This is quote-unquote the good cholesterol. When we talk about cholesterol in lab testing, it's a misnomer. Cholesterol and triglycerides can't travel around the body by themselves because these 2 fatty substances can't dissolve in the blood, which is mostly water. Instead, they are packaged together inside of a sphere made of molecules that can dissolve in water. And this sphere is covered in protein markers. So imagine there's this circular sphere shape carrier, and all over it is covered in these little tiny shipping labels. And these shipping labels, it allows cells in the body to recognize and interact with this carrier. And so the sphere can drop off its fat and its cholesterol cargo. So it's traveling around the body. All the cells are sensing those little shipping labels. And then the cell can take some of the fat or the cholesterol away from the sphere based on the shipping labels, which is really, really cool. I can't even fathom how cool this is. It's going on in our body a million times over. It just blows my mind. The specific proteins on the surface of this sphere, along with the ratio of cholesterol and fat inside the sphere, determine whether it's considered a high-density lipoprotein, HDL, or a low-density lipoprotein, LDL, or whatever other type. There's a lot of different subcategories in the LDL and HDL. So HDL is often referred to as the good because it helps to remove cholesterol from the blood vessels, and it carries it back to the liver for processing and eliminating it from the body. So it's taking all of this cholesterol away from where it doesn't need to be, and it's trying to get it to the liver where the liver can process it and get it out. This process of reverse cholesterol transport can help prevent the buildup of plaque in our arteries, and that helps to reduce the risk of heart disease and stroke. Therefore, doctors say, and they explain it to us because we need to have this explained to us simply because this is a really, really complex and challenging topic to understand. They say that high levels of HDL in the bloodstream are considered beneficial for cardiovascular health. But really all HDL is a carrier that gets some of the cholesterol out of our body, to the liver, out of our body. Meanwhile, the LDL is often referred to as bad cholesterol. And this is because it deposits cholesterol in the walls of the arteries, leading to the formation of plaque. Now, a lot of times, maybe that cholesterol needs to be where it gets to go, but because we overconsume so many fats and so much junk, it just starts to build up and build up and build up. And it's the over buildup formation of this plaque that is known as one of the hardest words in the English language to say. It's known as atherosclerosis, the buildup of plaque, atherosclerosis. And this can narrow the arteries and increase the risk of heart disease and stroke. So high levels of HDL have been associated with lower risks of heart disease and stroke, while low levels of HDL have been linked to increased risk of these conditions. Because if you have low levels of HDL, it can't go grab that buildup of plaque that's happening. And so then it starts to build up and it starts to squeeze those arteries shut. In fact, HDL is often used as a predictor of cardiovascular risk, along with other factors such as blood pressure, smoking, and your age. Additionally, HDL has anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties, which can help protect against the development of atherosclerosis. For inflammatory cells to cause problems in the blood vessels, they need to first bind to the vessel walls. And HDL helps to decrease the ability for these inflammatory cells to adhere to things. So that HDL won't let these inflammatory cells stick to things where they can build up, which is good. More research is coming out daily about the nuances of HDL, with more attention being paid to the subtypes of this larger class of molecules. But HDL is generally associated with better metabolic health, and HDL is one of the only lab tests you want to be higher rather than lower. Let's talk about ranges for HDL. Ranges considered normal by standard criteria is 40 milligrams per deciliter for men, greater than 40 for men, and greater than 50 for women. So if you want to be normal based on the standard criteria, greater than 40 for men, greater than 50 for women. But the optimal range, there is a U-shaped relationship between HDL levels and development of diseases. So with both low and very, very high levels, those being associated with increased risk. So there is a sweet spot for the lowest risk, and that sweet spot seems to be about anywhere between 50 and 90, although sources vary on this, anywhere between 50 and 90. But just know that they're finding out that even high levels of HDL, those are associated with an increased risk of some of these diseases that we're seeing. So 50 to 90 is the optimal range, is what Dr. Casey is saying in the book. Okay, so that's HDL. Let's go and move on to fasting glucose. This is one that I really like to talk about. I wore a continuous glucose monitor forever just to gather data on fasting glucose and then what the glucose levels in my body look like after I ate food. But fasting glucose measures your blood sugar and the levels of your blood sugar that are unaffected by a recent meal and should be tested after not eating anything for about 8 hours. No calories from eating or drinking. You want to be fasted for at least 8 hours to test your fasting glucose, which is why most people do it in the morning after they wake up. We learned why this is so important in earlier chapters of this book. A high fasting glucose level is a sign of insulin resistance, blocking glucose from getting into our cells. We also learned that the body initially overcompensates for this insulin block by producing more insulin. So this can work for a while. It's going to continue pushing this blood sugar into the cells, even though the cells already told the body that it doesn't want anymore, but now it's going to be doubling down on the insulin, which works for a little bit. But because of this overcompensation, fasting glucose levels can look normal for a long period of time while insulin resistance is developing in full force. And then eventually you're going to have not only high blood glucose levels, but also high blood insulin levels. Unfortunately, though, you won't know if insulin resistance is brewing unless you test fasting insulin, which is catastrophically not a standard lab test in the United States. Blows my mind. It's easy to do and it's cheap, but it's still something that you have to fight your doctor for sometimes. A study from The Lancet showed that insulin resistance can be picked up more than a decade before fasting glucose hits the diabetic range, meaning that we are knowingly missing a huge window of opportunity to intervene. 10 years? More on this a little bit later in the chapter. With that said, if your glucose is rising, it's a big warning sign of problems with how your cells are functioning and just a clue that bad energy processes like mitochondrial dysfunction, oxidative stress, chronic inflammation, it's a good clue that these are at play and that issues inside your cells are preventing the normal transmission of insulin signal. So the ranges, let's talk about the ranges. Ranges for fasting glucose that are considered normal by standard criteria is less than 100. But the optimal range should be anywhere between 70 and 85. We call blood sugar less than 100 normal, and Dr. Casey thinks this is a travesty because, as Dr. Robert Lustig once said, once the fasting glucose rises over 100, metabolic syndrome is in full force. It's already too late. I mean, it's not too late, but you're chasing something way later than you had to. There are no options for prevention anymore. You're in it. Now you're in a full-fledged treatment mode. But in fact, a fasting blood glucose of 90 is kind of already questionable. And it's important to remember that this number isn't just from one morning. This is something that you should do for weeks or months at a time to get an overall average, because there are going to be some mornings where you're high or low, depending on stress, depending on how late you ate, depending on how well you slept, depending on a multitude of factors. So you want to find the average and you want to stick it somewhere in between 70 and 85. If you're high, you want to make sure you take the necessary nutrition changes and lifestyle changes to start to figure out how to drop those numbers. And then, of course, if you're lower than 70, if you start to get into the 50s, there starts to become a problem with hypoglycemia. So there is a sweet spot on this as well. Okay, so that was fasting glucose. I'm going to go through just a few more here, even though there were a ton more in this chapter. So if you're really interested in this, I definitely highly recommend getting the book Good Energy and thumbing through this chapter. It was so enlightening. But we're going to move on to blood pressure, another really important metric that you can measure, and you can actually do this at home. I have a blood pressure cuff that I bought at Costco for, I think it was like $40. But high blood pressure is the most common preventable risk factor for cardiovascular disease, things such as heart disease, heart failure, stroke, heart attack, arrhythmias, chronic kidney disease, dementia, and arterial blockages in the extremities, blood clots. High blood pressure is the largest contributor to death and disability in the entire world. It exerts its ill effects on the body by damaging blood vessels and contributing to stiffness and blockages in the vascular system that can cut off critical blood flow in subtle ways over long periods of time. A little bit scary, yes, but preventable. Blood pressure is directly related to insulin resistance. Interestingly, one of the many functions of insulin is to stimulate nitric oxide, which used to be in some of my favorite pre-workouts back in the day, which I don't think are legal anymore. But nitric oxide is a chemical that dilates blood vessels and is released from cells of the blood vessel wall. I used to love it because it used to make my veins pop, and I really liked that. But nitric oxide, super important for helping to dilate your blood vessels, make them bigger. In insulin-resistant bodies, this process is impaired, leading to less dilation of the vessels, meaning constriction. And then all those processes of bad energy make this worse. Your increased inflammation leads to high blood pressure by downregulating nitric oxide synthase, which is just a protein enzyme that makes nitric oxide. And then the oxidative stress induces hypertension, which is high blood pressure, by causing damage to blood vessel walls and decreasing nitric oxide. So having bad energy, not great for blood pressure being a proxy for preventable risk factors that are killing many, many people today. Let's talk about the ranges that are considered normal by standard criteria for blood pressure. You've heard it before, the 120 over 80. Optimal ranges, actually you're finding that that's about right, 120 over 80. So when you take your blood pressure, you have your systolic and you have your diastolic. Systolic is the top number, 120 is a good number, less than 80, diastolic, the bottom number, is what you want. So that's the blood pressure ranges, 120/80. Waist circumference, we've heard this one before probably. Waist circumference matters because it is a marker of fat in and around your abdominal organs. Excess fat in this area is a sign of excess energy being deposited in places that it's not supposed to be. It's storing the energy because it has nowhere to go, and this is a place where we don't want it to really be stored. Fat can be stored in the body's following 3 compartments, and each carries a different level of risk for metabolic dysfunction. We can carry it subcutaneously. Subcutaneous is under the skin. Subcutaneous fat is the fat under the skin that you can pinch with your fingers. This fat is not really considered to be dangerous, and more of it is not really associated with an increased mortality. It's more of an aesthetic thing. There is visceral fat. Visceral fat is really huge in the media right now. Dr. Attia is talking about it. Dr. Huberman is talking about it. Visceral fat is a fat coating the organs in the abdomen. So think inside the viscera, in the organs. Think of it as a blanket of fat on top of your liver, on top of your intestines, on your spleen. This fat is dangerous. This fat promotes chronic inflammation, and this fat increases the risk of disease and early death. You do not want high visceral fat. And then there's another one called ectopic fat, ECTOPIC, ectopic fat. This is fat inside the cells and various organs like the liver, the heart, and the muscle. This fat is extremely dangerous. It blocks insulin receptor signaling and it increases the risk of disease and an early death. You do not want ectopic fat inside the cells, in your organs like liver fat, heart fat. When you eat a cow that has marbling in the steak, that is fat inside the muscle. You don't want fat inside the muscle. That makes your muscle, which is your organ of longevity, not beneficial. Visceral fat and ectopic fat are strongly associated with insulin resistance and metabolic abnormalities. Visceral fat is unique in that it acts as a hormone-secreting organ. Yikes. A hormone-secreting organ, visceral fat. So it secretes pro-inflammatory chemicals that recruit inflammatory cells. And this stew of inflammation causes fat to leak into the bloodstream, which is called lipolysis. And it blocks insulin signaling. The drive of insulin resistance starts. Ectopic fat directly blocks the cell's normal internal activities like insulin signaling. So it's just that much more negative for your health. Waist circumference is a useful, albeit it's kind of rudimentary, indicator of the level of visceral fat that you have, which expands our midlines. This is measured just above the top of your hip bone at about the level of your belly button. I usually just measure people's belly button and I ask them to measure their belly button because that's like a landmark that we can hit every single time. The amount of visceral fat helps predict metabolic dysfunction, regardless of whether someone is normal weight or obese. There are ways to measure visceral fat in more precise ways. You can do it via imaging studies, things like X-ray DEXA scans. But knowing your waist circumference is a really, really good place to start. So let's talk about what's considered normal by standard criteria when it comes to your waist circumference. So I'll do it in inches and centimeters. I don't know who's listening to this, but we're going to go less than 40 inches for men, which is 102 centimeters, less than 40 inches for men, and less than 35 inches for women, which is 88 centimeters. So that's the normal range. Optimal range, the International Diabetes Federation has proposed tighter cut points of less than 80 for women, which normal was supposed to be 88. So less than 80 centimeters, which is 31.5 inches, 31.5 inches. They said it was 35. So that's a good 3.5 inches less. And then for men, 35 inches, which the normal was 40. So 5 inches less. Which would be 90 centimeters. 35 inches would be 90 centimeters for men. And this is for the following ethnicities. So South Asian, Chinese, Japanese, and South and Central Americans. Now, for European, Sub-Saharan African, Middle Eastern, Eastern Mediterranean, a little bit in between both ranges. So the Asian, South Asian, Chinese, Japanese, South and Central American, they should be a little bit less than European, Sub-Saharan, African, Middle Eastern, Eastern Mediterranean. Those cut points are, for men, 37 inches, so just 3 inches less than a normal. And then for women, 31.5. It's about the same, 31.5. So right around in that range. If you have less than 40, great for men. If you have less than 35, great for women. Just know that there are better optimal ranges and cutoffs for that. And the last one that I want to really go over is the triglyceride to HDL ratio. This one I had a little bit hard time understanding, and I know a lot of people that I talked to had a hard time understanding it, but as soon as you have the numbers in front of you, it's a lot easier just to do the math. So after assessing each of those biomarkers that we talked about, there's one more step. You have to calculate your triglyceride to your HDL ratio to better understand your insulin sensitivity. So simply divide your triglycerides by your HDL. Interestingly, studies have shown that this value correlates well with underlying insulin resistance. So even if you are unable to access a fasting insulin test, like we said it was kind of hard to get, the triglyceride to HDL ratio can give you a general sense of where you're at. And it's actually pretty accurate equation. According to Dr. Mark Hyman, the triglyceride to HDL ratio is the best way to check for insulin resistance other than the insulin response test. According to a paper published in Circulation, the most powerful test to predict your risk of a heart attack is the ratio of your triglycerides to your HDL. Now, if the ratio is high, your risk for a heart attack increases 16-fold or 1,600%. This is because triglycerides go up and HDL, or good cholesterol, goes down with diabetes. Dr. Robert Lustig agrees the triglyceride to HDL ratio is the best biomarker for cardiovascular disease and the best surrogate marker of insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. These are two guys that kind of know what they're talking about, and they're saying that this is a great equation. Oddly enough, this ratio is not a metric used in standard clinical practice. Why? If you remember one thing from this chapter, remember this. You need to know your insulin sensitivity. It can give you life-saving clues about early dysfunction and bad energy brewing in your body. And it is best assessed by a fasting insulin test. But right now, this is not a standard test offered to you at your annual physical. So we are asking you to find a way to get to your fasting insulin by calculating with this ratio. So do this for you, for your children, for everybody that you care about. Do this ratio. The ranges considered normal by standard criteria are none because we don't have standard criteria. But the optimal ranges, what Dr. Calley Means, what Dr. Mark Hyman, what Dr. Robert Lustig are saying, anything above a ratio of 3 is strongly suggestive of insulin resistance. Not good. Anything above 3. You want to shoot for anything less than 1.5, although lower seems to be better. I recommend aiming for less than 1, is what Dr. Calley Means says. Whew, okay. She's shooting for the stars. Optimal range, less than 1. Anything less than 1.5, good. Lower is better. Anything above 3, strongly suggestive of insulin resistance. Her HDL cholesterol is 92, and her triglycerides are 47. That makes her ratio 0.51. She's well under that 1 mark. Nice job, Dr. Calley Means. Okay. So also in this chapter, there were 6 further tests that we're not going to talk about. Fasting insulin and calculation of something called HOMA-IR, H-O-M-A-I-R. They also talked about high sensitivity CRP, HSCRP. They talked about hemoglobin A1C. You've probably heard about that. Uric acid. There was a book by Dr. Perlmutter who wrote Drop Acid, a whole book about uric acid. They talked about liver enzymes, aspartate, gamma-glutamyl, things that are a little bit above my pay grade. Vitamin D, there was a really good part about that in vitamin D. Total cholesterol versus LDL cholesterol. So that chapter was just full of stuff that you can learn from when it comes to your blood work. So if you have your blood work done or you're going to get your blood work done, get this book, read this chapter, go over some of the stuff that we went through today and see how your takeaways compared to mine. And then also, to finish off this episode, I want to talk about some real-time tools. So we talked about continuous glucose monitoring, but imagine treating the human body like a rocket, equipped with sensors to detect potential problems before they occur. Think about when NASA sends a rocket up into space. They don't send the rocket up there and then wait for things to happen. No, they have little instruments and tools all over the rocket ship that can prevent things from happening, catastrophic events. But they measure these little tiny events before they can get to catastrophic levels. And this is the vision behind real-time health monitoring, a paradigm shift that has the potential to transform healthcare from a reactive, sick care system to a proactive health empowerment system. This is the dream right here. This is what we should be shooting for. I love this idea. What if we had devices on our body that told us exactly what's going on inside of us? We could learn when to eat what and how much of it, and that is based on our optimal goals to be as optimal as we can in whatever categories that we want to be. Like, that is in our foreseeable future, which is nuts to think about. The continuous glucose monitor is already here. CGM is one of the most powerful tools available for understanding and improving metabolic health. It's just a small plastic disc worn on the arm that continuously measures blood sugar levels every 10 minutes, sending the data to a smartphone. This provides a detailed picture of how your body responds to different foods, activities, and lifestyle factors in real time. It has this tiny little filament that you can't even feel that's in the skin. And it'll measure your blood sugar data, and you can use that data to help you make decisions in life. There are so many good benefits of CGM. Improves your food choices. It reduces cravings. It helps with food anxiety. It helps you use strategies to help stabilize spikes. It helps you to train yourself for better metabolic flexibility. It helps you to motivate your behavior change. There's just a lot of cool stuff that comes from there. If you're going to get a CGM, Levels is the company that I use. Their website is levelshealth.com. You should definitely check them out before you check anyone else out. They do a really good job. I'm a little biased, but yep, love them. Some key metrics that you should measure if you do get a continuous glucose monitor. Number one, your morning glucose. Remember, we're trying to stick it between 70 and 85 on average. And then you should definitely check out the dawn effect, which is a rise in glucose before waking, driven by hormones. And this can indicate insulin resistance if it's a pronounced glucose spike. Then you should test your post-meal glucose, understand what your body's responses are to different foods, aim for less than 30 milligrams increase from pre-eating to post-eating. So if you ate something and you started at 80, you don't want it to spike any more than 30 over that. If a food does spike you over 30 of your pre-meal glucose, it means that it was just probably a little bit too high of a carbohydrate meal. It depends though, right? Because it could spike and then it could drop back to baseline fairly quickly, meaning that your body has the ability to clear that glucose from your system. So you want to look at not just your post-meal glucose spike, but also like the area under the curve, which is like the height and duration of the spike before it returns back to baseline. You want to see if you react hypoglycemic to anything. Maybe you post-meal crash, indicating that a meal needs to be better balanced. Maybe it has too many refined grains or sugars. And you can pair your carbs with stuff like fiber, protein, and healthy fats to help with that crash. Also, things like your impact of stress. I noticed that like exercise and saunas and being in traffic spike glucose. It's insane. You got to look at that kind of stuff too. Impacts of your sleep for sure. Having poor sleep can plummet your insulin sensitivity, meaning that the next day your body reacts differently to the same foods. So like if I eat a food after sleeping really well and my glucose spike is normal, and then I don't sleep very well, maybe I go to a music festival or I stay out in Vegas, or I go to a wedding party and stay out all night, and then the next day I eat the same food, and then you can kind of see the changes of your insulin sensitivity and how the blood sugar spike changes based on sleep, which is cool. And then of course your average glucose throughout the day. And then long-term trends. That's the best part about continuous glucose monitors, is that you can track your long-term trends. By leveraging these real-time tools, you can gain actionable insights into your health and make informed decisions that optimize your health. So we have a CGM that helps you with a real-time measurement of your blood glucose, but then there are other real-time tools that we can use. You can use food journaling. Keeping a food journal is a powerful tool for optimizing your energy and overall health. It's about understanding what you're putting into your body and then being able to notate how it affects you. When patients keep a food journal, it provides a clear picture of their diet, making it easier to identify areas for improvement and easier for us to track progress. Research supports this. People who keep a food journal tend to lose more weight and maintain healthier diets. The benefits of a food journal: accountability, helps you to stay on track with your dietary goals. It gives you insight. It provides you a detailed view of what you are eating, making it easier to identify problems and patterns and triggers for symptoms that you may be feeling. And it also empowers you. By understanding your diet, you gain control over your health. So use a food logging app, something like MacroFactor or MyFitnessPal, or a simple paper journal, and review your food logs regularly to see where you can make healthier choices. I like to sometimes add in a food mood journal and talk about how that food makes you feel. So in my journal, I have the food that I've eaten, and then if I have any weird mood symptoms like lethargy, crankiness, shortness, or impatience, that kind of stuff, or definitely if it gives me intestinal distress, I'll notate that. Okay, so a food journal. Also, sleep data. Understanding your sleep patterns is crucial for maintaining good energy levels and overall health. Using a wearable sleep tracker can provide insights into your sleep quantity, your sleep quality, and your sleep consistency. My favorite sleep tracker by far is the Oura Ring, O-U-R-A. I have a link that can save you money if you message me. Oura is amazing. I've recommended it to so many members at the gym, so many clients and friends and family. I've recommended it so much that they've sent me a few different outfits, like sweatshirts and sweatpants, and I don't need them, but I've recommended so many. That's how much I believe in this product. I've used it for years and years. I was one of the first people to get it, and I think it's better than the Apple Watch. I think it's better than the Fitbit. I think it's better than the Whoop strap, only because, not that these things are bad, but because of the consistency of how you wear it. If it's a ring, you're always going to have it on, and you're almost never going to need to have it off and charging. Like, you can shower with it, you can sleep with it, you can lift with it. I lift with mine, never had a problem. It scratches it up, but it's fine. It's so durable. The things like the watches and the bracelets and the chest straps, I'm not going to wear these when I shower. I'm not going to wear these when I sleep. I don't love things on me. I take it off and on because it's uncomfortable. Like, if you're inconsistent with how you wear it, then the data that you get is inconsistent. So get a tracker that you will wear consistently. And for me, that is a ring, because I never have to take it off, and it charges. The charge is only required, like when it's brand new, you only have to charge it like 1 hour every 5 days. So that's a huge important part for me. But the benefits of a sleep tracker is it helps you identify any factors that affect your sleep quality, your sleep quantity. It helps make you informed decisions after you go drinking, and if you stay out at late, or if you watch screens right before bed, it'll tell you with objective data what happened, and you can't argue with it because, you look at the average over time and you can see trends. It helps you with better health because good sleep supports metabolic health more than anything. It reduces the risk of chronic diseases, and it improves your whole entire well-being. It's sleep is so important. Aim for 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night and use your sleep tracker to monitor any awakenings that you have, any deep sleep or REM sleep or light sleep stages that you're in, and how those can be changed with lifestyle changes. And we've done lots of episodes on how to affect that. And along with sleep, the reason why I love the Oura Ring so much as well is because it is also an activity tracker. So you should have an activity tracker, something that can track your movement, your steps, your heart rate. All of these things are really important to track over time to know if you're getting any better, if you're dropping below the average, if you need to increase anything. It gives you a number that you can shoot for daily. Aim for at least 7,000 steps a day, working up to 10,000. Track your active hours and strive for less inactive hours. Track how much sedentary time you are seated. Some trackers will tell you how much time you're spent not moving, and then you try to minimize that number as much as you can. Movement is life, motion is lotion, fitness is medicine. So we have a CGM, we have a food journal, we have sleep tracker and a movement tracker. You can also do things like a heart rate monitor tracking your HRV. HRV is a measure of the variability in between your heartbeats. It's a good indicator of your stress and your strain levels and how resilient you are to those stresses, which is a good indicator of your overall health. A higher HRV generally indicates better health and resilience, while a lower HRV can signal stress, fatigue, or even chronic disease. So benefits of tracking HRV: stress management and health insights, and something that you can objectively try to change over time based on your fitness level, your stress level, and then you can see if your HRV is dropping, and you can start to take away some of the stressful stuff. So for me, when I see my HRV dropping, I will take out some of my HIIT training, some of my high intensity workouts, and I'll add in more beach walks or more meditations or more sitting and reading or doing breath work. So I can see in live time how my stress bucket is being reacted, and how I can do things in my everyday to be able to maybe take it in a direction that I want to go. So like if I'm going to go on a trip, I don't want to be sick on that trip. So if I see my HRV dropping before this trip, I know I need to do more restorative stuff. And then I can slowly see that number building so that I can be, as good as I can be before we start that trip. Or if I have a physical event like a Spartan race or anything like that, I can make sure that my HRV is moving in the right direction to help set me up for success when it comes to those events. Another thing that you should be measuring is your resting heart rate. Resting heart rate is the number of heartbeats per minute when you are at rest. A lower resting heart rate usually indicates better cardiovascular health. Aim for a resting heart rate of lower than 80. Regular exercise can help lower your heart rate. Make sure you sleep well. The lower, usually the better. There are some really, really hardcore endurance athletes that are in like their 30s, which is crazy. I don't know the world record for, hey Siri, what's the world record for lowest resting heart rate?
The world record for the lowest resting heart rate ever recorded is 26 beats per minute, achieved by Daniel Green in 2014.
26 beats per minute? Holy heck. Check that guy for a pulse. Okay, I got to wrap this one up because this is getting a little long. I appreciate those of you that have stuck with it this far. I hope you got some really good information out of it. I think just the replacement of the doctor's office is what we really need to talk about. We are entering an era of bioobservability where accessible blood tests and real-time sensors provide a personalized understanding of our bodies. This shift from a reactive to a proactive healthcare system, it empowers individuals to take control of their health. This is exactly what we've been talking about. Being the CEO of your own health. By understanding and tracking these key metrics, you can make informed decisions to optimize your health and your energy levels. So I'm going to include the recommended ranges and the optimal ranges in the notes section of this episode. So feel free to check those out if you kind of didn't have the time to write those down. I'll also write in like the high sensitivity CRP, the hemoglobin, the uric acid, those things too in there just to have them. And then just to recap the recommended real-time metrics, tracking the real-time metrics of your continuous glucose monitor, your food journal or app, your sleep, your activity, and your resting heart rate. Those are all things that you should be tracking. I have a Google sheet called Living My Best Life spreadsheet, and I track everything in there every single night. Before I turn down the screens, I just enter all the stuff that I've tracked that day. And I have literally now years of data that tell me if I'm off track, on track, if I'm hitting these things that I need to hit. Start slow and start small. Start by tracking just one or two things. And then once you have that as a habit, just keep adding it on. The best time to start is now. The next best time to start is tomorrow. The worst time to start is when it's perfect and you have everything and you're tracking 100 things. Like, don't try to do it all at once. Just focus on one or two things. And then by focusing on the important metrics, you can make informed lifestyle choices. You can optimize your health and your energy. And this is going to lead to a better quality of life. Whew, we've covered a lot of ground in this chapter. We dove deep into how understanding the body through real-time data and key health metrics can transform your health and energy. And it might feel very dense, but remember, every piece of information we've discussed is important, and it is a step towards taking control of your health. Key takeaways: empower yourself with knowledge. Your body is constantly communicating with you through symptoms and biometrics. By understanding what these signals mean, you can take proactive steps to improve your health. Number 2, leverage technology. Use tools like CGMs, food journals, sleep trackers, activity trackers. Track key metrics, triglycerides, fasting glucose, blood pressure, waist circumference, and then adopt healthy habits. The things that we talk about, the pillars of health: stress, movement, nutrition, sleep, recovery. Remember that you're not alone in this journey. We're all learning to navigate our health in this complex world. And the tools and the knowledge that we have today can help guide us towards a healthier future. Even though the medical system is set up to take our money and to manage our symptoms, not cure our symptoms or help us counteract all the things that we do negatively. They're just meant to manage and keep us sick, essentially. The power to transform our health is in our own hands, and that should be super hopeful. Stay hopeful, stay inspired, and stay tuned for the next episode. We're going to continue to explore how you can harness the power of good energy to live your best life. Until then, just take one small step today. Track one thing for the next week that can help. You'll be amazed at the progress that you can make if you just keep adding it on. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you on the next episode. And that's it, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Living the Dream podcast. Share the knowledge that you gain with your friends and family and hold each other accountable. If you enjoyed this content, it helps a ton if you could post a screenshot of this episode on your social media stories and include one takeaway that you learned. Tag me at livingthedream_podcast or at coachdamian_SD and let us know how this episode benefited you. Let us know what we missed. Let us know what we got wrong. Tell us how you felt about what we shared in today's episode. We want to know. Message us with any suggestions or tips that would help your Living the Dream team that we can discuss on future episodes. I'll be right here with you, working on making us stronger, happier, and healthier humans. Until next time, friends, keep living the dream.